October 14th. The sky over the Kamchatka Peninsula is a vault of cold, black glass. Below, the sea is a sheet of ink, hiding the silent, steel leviathans of the Red Banner Northern Fleet. On the ground, inside a concrete bunker buried deep in the frozen earth, a young lieutenant stares at a circular green screen. His world is this screen. It is a perfect world, a world of order and control. The screen shows nothing. It is supposed to show nothing. For 1,000 kilometers in every direction, the air is clean, swept by the powerful, rhythmic pulse of the P-14 Tall King early warning radar. The system is the shield of the motherland. It is infallible. It is a god of electromagnetism, and tonight, the god is sleeping peacefully. Then, something happens. A flicker. Not a return, not a solid, confident blip of a hostile aircraft, but a shred of electronic noise. A ghost on the machine. The lieutenant leans forward, his face bathed in the green glow. The flicker is there again, on the next sweep. It is deep inside their airspace, a place no unauthorized object has been in a generation. He runs a diagnostic. The console blinks back a string of green text. System normal. All parameters optimal. He checks the power regulators. Stable. He checks the atmospheric interference filters. Nominal. The machine insists it is telling the truth. The machine does not lie. The flicker coalesces. For a brief, terrifying second, it resolves into a definite plot. It has a position. It has an altitude. But it has no velocity vector. The tracking computer, designed to calculate the trajectories of supersonic bombers and intercontinental ballistic missiles, cannot make sense of the data. The object is moving too slowly. It is a hawk trying to catch a rat in a burrow. The system is too powerful, too fast, to see something so insignificant. Vostok Command, this is Sentry Post 4. I have a possible contact. The lieutenant's voice is tight, betraying a professional calm he does not feel. He reads the coordinates. The silence on the other end of the line is a physical thing. Sentry 4, repeat last. The voice from command is flat, laced with disbelief. He repeats the coordinates. He describes the contact. Slow, erratic, high altitude. He can feel the incredulity radiating through the handset. The duty officer at Vostok Command is probably thinking the same thing he is. It is a flock of geese. It is a weather anomaly. It is a ghost in the system, a product of cheap vodka and a long night. But the contact is persistent. It drifts, lazy and arrogant, over the most sensitive naval installation on the continent. It is a direct, mocking insult. The protocols are rigid. The protocols must be followed. The decision is made. 2 interceptors are scrambled from the alert strip at Yelizovo. The pilots are jolted from a fitful sleep, running across the frozen tarmac as the turbines of their high-altitude fighters scream to life. They are the best. They are the guardians of the Arctic Gate. Within minutes, they are climbing at a near-vertical angle, punching through the thin, cold air, their afterburners tearing twin holes in the night. The lead pilot, a veteran of 1,000 uneventful sorties, switches his own powerful look-down, shoot-down radar to search mode. Nothing. The screen is empty. Sentry 4, this is Eagle 1. My scope is clear. I have no contact. Confirm vector. Eagle 1, vector confirmed. The voice from the ground crackles back, now strained, frantic. Target is 10 kilometers off your nose. He is directly in front of you. The pilot scans the blackness ahead. He sees only stars. The cold, indifferent glitter of constellations that have looked down on this land for millennia. There is nothing there. He feels a prickle of sweat on his neck despite the cockpit's chill. How do you fight an enemy you cannot see? Sentry 4, I repeat, the sky is empty. He transmits, his voice rising. There is nothing here. On the ground, the lieutenant watches the impossible drama unfold. He sees the 2 bright, fast-moving icons of the friendly interceptors. He sees the slow, maddening flicker of the ghost. The fighters fly through the ghost's position. They turn, circle, and fly through it again. They are chasing a phantom. The contact vanishes. It does not fly away. It does not accelerate out of range. It simply ceases to exist. One moment it is there, a puzzle on the screen. The next, there is only the clean, empty sweep of the radar. The screen is perfect again. The god in the machine is placid. The interceptor pilots are recalled. They land in a state of confused fury. In the debriefing room, they shout. They accuse the ground controllers of incompetence, of drunkenness. They saw nothing. They felt nothing. They wasted fuel and risked their lives chasing a hallucination. The lieutenant at Sentry Post 4 files his report. He attaches the radar tapes, the recordings that show the impossible object. He writes his conclusion in spare, military prose. Unidentified aerial phenomenon. Origin unknown. Intent unknown. He does not write what he is thinking. He does not write about the cold dread that has settled in his stomach. The feeling that the perfect, orderly world he had believed in was a lie. That the great shield of the motherland was not a wall of steel, but a sieve. And something had just slipped through. Something impossible. The report travels up the chain of command like a poison. At first, it is met with skepticism. A single, uncorroborated radar anomaly. A glitch. But then, another report arrives from the Kola Peninsula. Then one from the Baltic Fleet. Then a particularly brazen incident over a strategic missile silo complex deep in the heartland. A pattern emerges from the noise. It is not a glitch. It is not a weather event. It is a systematic, deliberate, and utterly successful campaign of intrusion. The isolated incident over Kamchatka is elevated from a tactical puzzle to a full-blown strategic emergency. The highest echelons of the Red Banner Command are convened in a windowless room in the capital. The air is thick with cigar smoke and fear. The problem is not just that something is getting through. The problem is what it represents. Their entire military doctrine is predicated on a single, unshakable belief: the invulnerability of their airspace. For generations, they have invested trillions of rubles in creating the most dense, layered, and powerful air defense network in human history. It is a fortress built on concentric rings of lethality. The outer ring is the early warning radar, massive installations capable of detecting a bomber formation taking off from the adversary's continent. The next ring is the long-range surface-to-air missile batteries, weapons designed to reach up to the edge of space and swat down high-flying reconnaissance planes. Closer in are the medium-range missiles, the short-range systems, a forest of steel and high explosives. The final line of defense is the interceptor force, thousands of the fastest, highest-climbing fighters in the world. It is a doctrine of brute force, of overwhelming numbers, of attrition. It is a hammer designed to smash any nail. The system is built to detect and destroy fast, loud, hot targets. It is a product of their industrial philosophy. Quantity has a quality all its own. Their interceptors are powerful, their missiles are huge, their radars blast out megawatts of power. This new threat, this ghost, renders all of it obsolete. It does not challenge the hammer. It simply isn't a nail. It is smoke. It is a whisper. It invalidates decades of training, billions in investment, and the core strategic assumptions of a superpower. It proves that the fortress, their great national project, has a door, and the enemy has found the key. The geopolitical implications are terrifying. The strategic balance of the world rests on the principle of mutually assured destruction, a fragile peace maintained by the certainty that any nuclear attack would be met with a devastating counterattack. That certainty relies on an assured early warning. But how can you have a warning if the delivery vehicle is invisible? The Ghost could be a reconnaissance platform, photographing their most secret installations at will. It could be an electronic warfare asset, listening to their every command and control communication. Or, in the darkest scenario, it could be a weapon, a silent, unseen harbinger of a decapitating first strike, capable of delivering a nuclear, chemical, or biological payload to the heart of their command structure without a single alarm bell ringing. The nation is suddenly, terrifyingly naked. This fear does not remain confined to the high-level strategy rooms. It trickles down, poisoning the morale of the men on the front lines. In the cold, isolated radar posts and air bases that the vast periphery of the nation, rumor becomes fact. The Ghost is given names. The radar crews call it the Prizrak, the Ghost. The pilots, with a more personal terror, call it the Nevidimka, the Invisible One. Stories circulate in hushed tones in mess halls and briefing rooms. A pilot who chased it and whose instruments went haywire. A radar operator who locked onto it for a full 3 seconds before it vanished, leaving behind a permanent burn on his screen. These are myths, campfire tales for the electronic age, but they serve to give a name to a formless dread. The confidence of the air defense forces, once an unshakable pillar of the state's power, begins to corrode. Pilots grow hesitant. They are sent on endless, fruitless patrols, chasing vectors that lead to empty sky. They burn fuel, they wear out their engines, and they exhaust their nerves. They are hunters sent to catch the wind. Ground crews become paranoid, constantly recalibrating their perfectly functional equipment, convinced the fault must lie within their own machines. The system, once a source of pride, becomes an object of suspicion. The men no longer trust their screens. The green sweep, once a comfort, is now a source of anxiety. In its emptiness, they see not safety, but the presence of an absence. They are haunted by what they cannot see. A deep, psychological rot sets in. The machine is perfect, the doctrine is sound, yet the sky belongs to a ghost. The High Command understands that they are not just facing a technological problem, but a crisis of faith. And a military that has lost faith in its tools and its purpose is already defeated. The order comes down from the highest authority in the land. It is unequivocal. A special commission is to be formed. The full resources of the state are to be mobilized. The mandate is brutally simple. Solve the mystery of the ghost. Find it, understand it, and build a weapon to kill it. The commission is a grim assembly of the nation's sharpest minds and most powerful men. It is a troika of fear. The Committee for State Security provides its ruthless investigators and global intelligence network. The Military-Industrial Commission brings its top scientists and engineers, the men who build the nation's swords and shields. The Air Defense Command contributes its operational experts and the raw, terrifying data from the front lines. They meet in a secure facility, a place where the truth, however ugly, can be spoken. The hunt for answers begins. The first step is to gather every shred of physical or electronic evidence. Special teams are put on permanent standby, ready to scramble to any location where the ghost might have crashed or been shot down. They wait, but the call never comes. The ghost leaves no wreckage. It leaves no bodies. It leaves no trace of its passage save for the lingering fear in the minds of those who have encountered it. The radar tapes are the only tangible evidence they have. They are flown to a central research institute and analyzed with an almost religious fanaticism. Scientists watch the recordings in darkened rooms, their faces illuminated by the ghostly green replay. They isolate the flickers. They enhance them. They try to find a signature, a pattern. The data is maddening. The object's radar cross-section appears to be smaller than a bird's, yet it operates at altitudes where only the most powerful military aircraft can survive. It seems to appear and disappear at random, but a deeper analysis suggests it is not random at all. The flickers correlate with the object's angle relative to the radar emitter. It is as if the object is a complex crystal, and they are only seeing the brief, brilliant glint of a single facet catching the light. For the rest of the time, it is invisible. The pilots who have chased the ghost are brought in for debriefing. These are not ordinary debriefings. They are intense, grueling interrogations conducted by psychologists from the committee. The pilots are treated not as heroes, but as unreliable witnesses, potentially unstable. Their stories are contradictory. One pilot swears he saw a dark, triangular shape against the moon for a split second. Another insists he saw a series of faint, pulsing lights. A third saw nothing at all, but felt a strange turbulence, a pressure wave where no aircraft should have been. The investigators dismiss most of it as hypoxia, vertigo, or simple fear. Captured agents from the Western Alliance are interrogated. The sessions are brutal. The agents are asked about Project Ghost, about the Invisible One, about a phantom aircraft. They respond with blank stares. Their confusion appears genuine. The interrogators conclude that either the agents are of too low a rank to know anything, or the project is so secret that its existence is hidden even from their own intelligence services. This second possibility is even more frightening. The investigation, intended to bring clarity, only deepens the mystery. The evidence they gather is a collection of paradoxes. The ghost is both there and not there. It is slow, yet it operates in a high-performance environment. It is insubstantial, yet it is a profound strategic threat. It is like trying to assemble a puzzle with pieces from a dozen different boxes. The picture that emerges is nonsensical, a violation of the known laws of engineering and physics. The Commission is trapped. They are men of logic, of science, of engineering. They believe that for every effect, there is a cause. But here, the effect is impossible. The cause is unknowable. They are facing not just a superior technology, but a phenomenon that seems to mock their entire worldview. The hunt for answers has failed. They have not found a single, solid clue. All they have found is more fear, more confusion, and the chilling certainty that the problem is far worse than they could have ever imagined. The analysts at the Commission, faced with a void of hard evidence, do what all bureaucracies do when confronted with the unknown. They retreat into the familiar. They project their own worldview, their own technological philosophies, onto their adversary. They cannot comprehend a system they do not understand, so they attempt to explain the ghost using concepts from their own arsenal. Their thinking becomes a mirror, reflecting their own strengths and, more importantly, their own limitations. They fall victim to the most dangerous trap in military intelligence, the magic bullet fallacy. They become obsessed with finding the one revolutionary component, the single piece of hardware that explains everything. They are searching for a new gun, a new engine, a new armor. Their industrial culture, built on heroic, breakthrough inventions, primes them for this way of thinking. They cannot imagine that the adversary's advantage might not be a thing at all, but a new way of thinking. They cannot see the system for the parts. This fundamental misunderstanding gives birth to a series of flawed, but internally consistent theories. Each theory isolates one aspect of the ghost's behavior and extrapolates an entire technology from it. The first and most popular theory is that of a miracle paint. The analysts theorize that the adversary has developed a revolutionary radar-absorbent material, a coating so advanced it can render an entire aircraft invisible to electromagnetic waves. The nation's top chemical and materials science institutes are given a crash priority directive: invent this paint. They spend years mixing exotic polymers and carbon compounds, testing them in radar chambers, and failing, again and again, to replicate an effect they only imagine exists. A second faction champions the theory of advanced electronic warfare. They argue the ghost is not physically stealthy at all. Instead, it must carry a powerful and sophisticated digital jamming suite. This electronic brain, they propose, actively analyzes their radar signals and transmits a perfectly out-of-phase return, canceling out the reflection. It is a brute force electronic solution, something they themselves are working on. It is a comfortable idea. It suggests the adversary is simply a few years ahead on a technological path they are already on. Vast sums are diverted to developing new radar systems with complex, frequency-hopping waveforms, designed to defeat a jammer that isn't there. A third, more radical group proposes a new form of propulsion. They focus on the ghost's apparent lack of a heat signature. An aircraft without heat is an aircraft without a conventional engine. Therefore, they reason, the adversary must have perfected some exotic, non-thermal drive. Whispers of plasma engines, of magnetohydrodynamics, of technologies bordering on science fiction fill the committee rooms. It is a theory born of desperation, an attempt to explain one mystery by invoking an even greater one. The theories grow more esoteric as the intrusions continue. Some analysts, noting the ghost's slow speed and high altitude, revive the idea of the military airship. They imagine a vast, semi-rigid dirigible filled with helium, capable of hovering for weeks at a time on the edge of the atmosphere, a silent, unmoving eye in the sky. It is a 19th century solution to a 21st century problem. There is the hypersonic glider theory, a weapon launched from the adversary's homeland that enters the atmosphere at 20 times the speed of sound, then glides unpowered for thousands of kilometers, its skin cooled by the upper atmosphere, making it difficult to detect by infrared sensors. And in the darkest corners of the investigation, there are whispers of even stranger ideas. A direct neural interface, allowing a pilot to merge with his machine. A bioengineered drone, a creature of flesh and wire. Based on these profoundly wrong conclusions, new countermeasures are devised and implemented. They are futile, costly, and often tragically counterproductive. Believing they face a stealth aircraft, they order their radar operators to increase transmission power, blasting the skies with megawatts of energy. This does nothing to detect the ghost, but it makes their own radar sites shine like beacons to the adversary's listening posts, revealing their exact locations, frequencies, and operational schedules. Acting on the electronic warfare theory, they command fighter pilots to turn off their own radars and attempt visual range intercepts, hoping to sneak up on the jammer. This is suicide. The pilots are flying blind, deprived of their most important sensor, into a sky controlled by an enemy they cannot see. They are a hawk trying to catch a rat in a burrow, but now the hawk has been ordered to wear a blindfold. The result is a series of near misses and collisions with their own aircraft, and a further plummeting of morale. They are fighting shadows, and the shadows are winning. While the Red Banner Command was chasing phantoms in the Siberian sky, the answer was being quietly calculated in a windowless room in the desert. It was not a place of gleaming machinery or heroic engineers. It was a sterile, climate-controlled space filled with humming cabinets of electronics. The ghost was not born in a foundry or a wind tunnel. It was born inside a supercomputer. The true origin of the technological advantage was not a single invention. It was a quiet, almost unnoticed revolution in three distinct fields: mathematics, materials science, and computation. It began decades earlier with a highly theoretical paper published by a reclusive German mathematician. The paper laid out a complex set of equations that could, in theory, predict the way a radar wave would reflect off a composite shape made of multiple flat planes. The paper was academically brilliant but considered practically useless. The calculations were so complex that solving them for a single shape would take a human years. The paper was filed away and forgotten. 2 decades later, an engineer working for the adversary's advanced research agency stumbled upon it. By this time, something fundamental had changed in the world. The integrated circuit had been invented. The age of the computer had begun. This engineer realized that the useless equations were only useless because of the limitations of the human mind. A computer, a machine that could perform millions of calculations per second, could solve them. And if you could solve the equations, you could reverse them. You could design a shape, from first principles, that would deflect almost all radar energy away from its source. You could design invisibility. This was the core innovation, the philosophical leap that the Eastern Bloc, with its focus on incremental improvements to existing designs, had missed. The adversary's advantage was not a piece of hardware. It was a system, an integrated trinity of concepts. The first element was computational supremacy. The adversary had poured its national wealth into developing a vast and accessible computer infrastructure. Their designers had access to processing power that the Red Banner Command's top scientists could only dream of. They could build an aircraft entirely out of numbers, testing thousands of configurations in a digital wind tunnel before a single piece of metal was ever cut. The Ghost's angular, alien shape was the product not of a human eye, but of a million hours of processing time. It was the physical manifestation of a mathematical equation. The second element was systems integration. The drone itself was a marvel, but it was only one piece of a much larger, networked organism. The adversary had created a global information network. Satellites in orbit constantly mapped the electronic landscape of the Eastern Bloc, pinpointing the location, frequency, and beam direction of every radar installation. This data was fed in real time to the Ghost's mission controllers. The drone's flight path was not a straight line. It was a delicate, intricate ballet, calculated and recalculated every second by a ground-based supercomputer. The Ghost did not need to be perfectly invisible from all angles. It only needed to be invisible from the precise angle at which a specific radar was looking at it in that specific moment. It weaved through the gaps in their sensor net, a thread passing through the eye of a dozen different needles. It was a predator that knew the exact location of every hunter's gun. The third element was an engineering philosophy rooted in new materials and manufacturing techniques. The computer-generated shape, with its sharp angles and flat planes, was aerodynamically unstable. It could not fly on its own. It was kept in the air only by a powerful flight control computer making thousands of minute adjustments to its control surfaces every second. This required a level of digital flight control that was generations ahead of anything the Eastern Bloc possessed. Furthermore, the shape had to be built from materials that did not reflect radar. This meant abandoning metal and embracing carbon fiber composites, radar-absorbent plastics, and specialized ceramics. Building the Ghost required a level of precision manufacturing, chemical engineering, and quality control that was simply absent in a command economy geared towards the mass production of simple, rugged steel tanks. This system fully demystified the impossible events. The flicker on the radar screen? It was the rare, fleeting moment when one of the drone's flat-plane facets aligned perfectly with a radar emitter and receiver, reflecting a tiny, momentary burst of energy. The impossibly slow speed? The drone was deliberately slow, allowing it to conserve fuel for extreme endurance and giving its onboard systems ample time to receive updates and plot the safest course. The lack of a heat signature? Its small, highly efficient turbofan engine was buried deep within the fuselage, its exhaust shielded and cooled before being vented, making it nearly invisible to infrared sensors. There was no magic. There was no new physics. There was only mathematics, computation, and a system of systems so advanced that from the outside, it looked like magic. It was the brutal, logical conclusion of a microchip defeating a smokestack. The breakthrough came not from a feat of intelligence, but from a stroke of blind, stupid luck. A freak ice storm, a rare weather event over the barren plains of the East, caught a Ghost on its long flight home. A layer of ice, heavy and uneven, formed on its precisely angled surfaces. The delicate aerodynamic balance, maintained second by its flight computer, was destroyed. The drone, its digital brain fighting a losing battle with physics, could not maintain altitude. Following its emergency protocols, it sought the flattest, most isolated area and executed a perfect, silent belly landing in a snow-covered field, miles from the nearest village. A border patrol, investigating what they assumed was a crashed weather balloon, stumbled upon the impossible. The object was transported under the highest security to a secret research facility deep in the Ural Mountains. When the nation's top aviation engineers first laid eyes on it, their initial reaction was not fear, but contemptuous disbelief. The thing was ugly. It was a mess of sharp, unnatural angles. It looked like a child's crude drawing of an airplane. It was made of a dull, black material that felt like plastic. There were no rivets, no visible welds, only smooth, bonded seams. "This is their great weapon," the chief designer scoffed. "It looks like it was built in a garage." Then the analysis began, and the disbelief curdled into a cold, sickening horror. The first shock was technological. They tested the skin. It was not a paint. The carbon composite material itself was impregnated with microscopic iron spheres, designed to absorb radar energy. But the shape was the true revelation. They built a scale model and placed it in their most advanced wind tunnel. The results were a nightmare. The shape was so unstable it tumbled out of control at the slightest disturbance. It was, by all of their metrics, incapable of flight. It took them weeks to understand the truth. The Ghost did not fly because its shape was aerodynamic. It flew because a computer, far more powerful than any they possessed, refused to let it fall. It was an inherently unstable design, tamed by a digital brain. They were looking at a flying computer. The second shock was industrial. "We cannot build this," the head of manufacturing stated, his voice a flat whisper. He had analyzed the composite materials. The purity of the carbon weave, the precision of the heat-cured resin, the microscopic tolerances of the molded parts. It was a level of craftsmanship that their industrial base, optimized for hammering out thousands of simple, rugged tanks, could not hope to replicate. Their factories were blacksmith shops. This required a clean room. The adversary was not just building better aircraft. They were building them in a different industrial reality. The third and most profound shock was philosophical. It was the dawning, humiliating realization that for a decade, they had been asking the completely wrong questions. They had poured their national treasure into making their fighters faster, their missiles longer ranged, their radars more powerful. They had been obsessed with winning a fight. The adversary had simply chosen not to fight at all. They had made their aircraft invisible. It was a paradigm shift so total, so fundamental, that it bordered on a different dimension of warfare. The room was a tomb. The engineers, the generals, the scientists, they stared at the angular black object, and in its alien geometry, they saw the full, terrifying scope of their own obsolescence. The order came down from the very top, from a leadership that could not comprehend the depth of the problem. It was an order born of ego and desperation. Copy it. Screw for screw, the nation's best design bureau was tasked with the impossible. It became a national crusade, a secret, frantic effort to reverse engineer the future. It was a colossal failure. They could not replicate the composite skin. Their best efforts produced a material that was too heavy and riddled with microscopic impurities that lit up on radar like a string of lights. They could not manufacture the flight control computer. Their microchips were too large, too slow, and consumed too much power. Their best programmers could not crack the millions of lines of code that formed the drone's digital soul. Their attempt to build a copy was like a medieval alchemist trying to replicate a modern microprocessor by melting down sand. They could see the object, they could touch it, but they could not grasp the science, the industry, or the philosophy that had given it life. They had captured the ghost's corpse, but its spirit remained forever beyond their reach. The project was quietly shelved, a monument to their own humiliating inadequacy. The final scorecard was brutal in its simplicity. Over a decade of operations, the adversary's fleet of invisible drones flew thousands of sorties over the most heavily defended airspace on the planet. They photographed every secret naval base, every missile silo, every command bunker. They mapped the entire electronic order of battle of a superpower. The number of drones lost to enemy action was zero. The number of times they were even successfully tracked was zero. In return, the Red Banner Command spent billions of rubles on failed research projects, on useless countermeasures, on thousands of pointless intercept missions that burned out pilots and machines for nothing. The kill ratio was infinite. The cost-exchange ratio was a weapon in itself, bleeding a fragile economy one fruitless patrol at a time. This single, devastating technological asymmetry was more than just a military problem. It was a symptom of a deep, systemic sickness. It was the verdict of history delivered silently in the night sky. A society that rewarded ideological conformity over innovation, that centralized all knowledge and suppressed dissent, that built its economy on brute force extraction rather than computational power, could not compete in the new age. The ghost drone did not cause the collapse of the Eastern Bloc, but it was a perfect, crystalline symbol of why that collapse was inevitable. It proved, beyond any doubt, that the command economy was technologically, industrially, and intellectually bankrupt. The microchip had defeated the smokestack. The ultimate failure was not one of engineering, but of imagination. The Red Banner Command, with its rigid, hierarchical worldview, saw warfare as a physical contest of mass and energy. Their doctrine was built on more tanks, bigger missiles, more powerful radars. They could not conceive of a victory achieved not through brute force, but through information dominance. They were fixated on building a better, stronger shield, while the adversary had quietly forged a key that rendered all shields, no matter how strong, utterly irrelevant. The flaw was not in their hardware. The flaw was in their thinking. The legacy of the Ghost would define the future. The principles it embodied, stealth through computational design, victory through systems integration, and the supremacy of information over mass, became the new gospel of warfare. The age of great armies clashing on open fields was over. The age of the network, of the unseen strike, of the intelligent system, had begun. The lessons learned from the silent passage of a ghost over their territory were paid for in the hard currency of national humiliation and, ultimately, geopolitical collapse. They had built their defenses to stop a lion, and they had been devoured by a virus. They had constructed the most formidable wall in human history, a fortress of concrete, steel, and radar stretching across 11 time zones. They guarded it with the full, unquestioning might of a global superpower. They scanned the skies for the signature of an army, for the heat of a missile, for the roar of a bomber. They never thought to look for a ghost. And the ghost, a quiet whisper of mathematics and carbon fiber, passed through their walls as if they were not there at all, carrying with it the silent, undeniable verdict of their end.